Welcome to this lecture on the peace concept. Peace concept refers to the meaning or the definition of what peace is. And that concept or definition of peace is central to any consideration of peace studies and peace research. In order to study and understand and pursue peace, we need to understand what it is. And that's a point of departure for our analysis. The peace concept is sometimes referred to as the peace image in the literature. The concept of peace has two basic dimensions. One is the value of peace or peace value, and that refers to the content or substance of peace. So what is the content of peace is the idea of this dimension. The peace sphere, the second dimension, refers to the space where peace exists. That is, what level of society, what level of human interaction does peace pertain? And as we'll see, there's a full range of peace spheres from the local to the global. Turning to the idea of a peace value, or what peace is, answering the question what peace is, we first encounter the idea of what is referred to as negative peace. Negative peace refers to originally as the absence of war. So there was peace when there was no warfare occurring between peoples, societies, nations. Later in the literature, as Matsuo suggests, is that negative peace was expanded, the idea was expanded to include the absence of violence in all its forms, in particular structural and cultural violence. There was peacelessness, it was thought, and now fully accepted. In spite of the absence of war, there can exist harm and suffering a variety of ways, a variety of forms of injustice, oppression and domination, poverty, malnutrition, illiteracy, various kinds of human rights violations. So the idea of peace expanded to include the absence of violence, and in a few minutes we'll talk about the nature of violence in its both structural and cultural dimensions. An alternative peace value is what we refer to as positive peace. And positive peace is the existence of justice. And it's comprised of various elements and values and principles. So this conception of peace is not negative in the sense that it's an absence of something, but peace can be, and probably most pertinently, can be defined as the presence of something, the existence of something, a certain state of affairs, a certain condition, and as it is argued, and as we'll discuss, that condition is the condition of justice. So peace can be defined in a positive way as the existence or the presence of justice on all levels of society. So we turn to the main concept, or the main sphere of peace, which is society. So there can be inner peace or internal peace, and that's a very important thing. Our concern is more having to do with society and relationships between persons within a social context, within society. And we can offer a definition of what society is based upon the work of John Rawls and others, is that society can be conceived as a system of social cooperation. Social cooperation at the society level is organized in terms of institutions and those institutions form the basic structure of society. So when we think of society, we think of social institutions, and those social institutions comprise the basic structure of any given society: local, national, regional, international, global. All of these are purported, if they're societies, then they are systems of social cooperation. Institutions, in turn, are formalized, rule-based practices, and as such, they're similar to a game. Games are rule-constituted and regulated practices. And institutions have constitutive rules as well as do games, which define the game or institution itself, as well as secondary rules that govern its play. Think of chess or a baseball or a card game. The game is defined by its rules and governed by those rules. Institutions, like games, are forms of social cooperation. So even though there can be competition within an institution, just as there is in many games, it's competitive. But even when competitive, the competition takes place within a system of cooperation, and that competition could not take place outside of a system of cooperation defined by rules that constitute and regulate it. The evolution of human beings, in particular our social relationships and the organizations of our society, have all proceeded on the foundation of cooperation. The security of persons and the better life that it affords compels cooperation within the organized social forms that comprise human society. So we're better off in societies, we're better off through systems of cooperation, and those systems are organized social forms that comprise society. Cooperation is contingent upon trust. It is contingent upon the mutual assurance that the rules will be abided by. That cooperation, that everyone will cooperate. And it is rational to cooperate only if there is mutual assurance that others will be reasonable, that is, they will adhere to the rules and practices of the institutions of the society. This is illustrated by the well-known prisoner's dilemma, what is called the prisoner's dilemma. And the dilemma runs as follows. Two members of a criminal gang are arrested and incarcerated. Each person is held in confinement without communication with the other member of the gang. And the prosecutors in this scenario offer each prisoner a plea deal. Each prisoner is given the opportunity to either betray the other by testifying that the other committed the crime, or to cooperate with the other by remaining silent. The possible outcomes are, if A and B both betray each other, each of them receives a 2-year sentence. If one betrays the other and the other remains silent, A will be set free and B will serve 3 years, and vice versa. So if one of the members betrays the others, takes the plea deal, and the other does not and remains silent, then the member who has remained silent is sentenced to 3 years, and the one who betrays the other is set free. If A and B cooperate and both remain silent, they will receive only a year in prison each. So under the conditions of distrust, where the two members do not trust each other and will accept the plea, driven by individual rational self-interest, that leads to the worst outcome. While cooperation, scenario 3, both cooperating and remaining silent, leads to the best outcome. This dilemma illustrates the claim that cooperation requires mutual assistance and trust between the parties. So we could ask, what social conditions generally promote the development of mutual assurance and trust among citizens? One historic and very famous answer to this question was offered by Thomas Hobbes, the British philosopher in the 17th century, who argued that the existence of a coercive state, which he called the Leviathan, is the only condition capable of guaranteeing compliance to the law and thus providing mutual assurance. In his view, establishing trust requires that citizens contract with a coercive power that will guarantee cooperation through force. The Leviathan is autocratic and thereby inconsistent with the democratic value of freedom and self-determination. So from a democratic point of view, we wouldn't accept Hobbes's solution to the problem of trust and cooperation, an autocratic power ensuring law abidance. From a democratic point of view, we would want, and I would submit from a peace point of view, we would seek a non-authoritarian solution to trust. John Rawls offers one conception of trust as justice as fair terms of social cooperation. He notes that cooperation is distinct from socially coordinated activity. Hobbes was not really after cooperation, but coordination. And cooperation, from Rawls' perspective, is guided by publicly recognized rules and procedures which are accepted and as properly regulating their conduct. Fair terms of cooperation specify an idea of reciprocity. All who are engaged in cooperation and do their part as the rules and procedures require are to benefit in some appropriate way. The idea of a political conception of justice, the idea of justice, is a way to characterize the fair terms of social cooperation. That is, justice, the principles of justice, the ethical values and moral principles of justice define the terms, the fair terms of social cooperation. That is, justice speaks to the rules or the terms that we need to accept, affirm, and abide by in order to engage in social cooperation. And these principles of justice specify basic rights and duties within the context of the main institutions of society, and they also specify the terms or rules that govern those institutions. An additional primary function of fair terms of cooperation, that is the principles of justice, is the nonviolent adjudication and resolution of conflict. So justice speaks both to the regulation of institutions and social cooperation. It also speaks to how we go about nonviolently resolving the inevitable conflicts that will arise between persons in those institutions. Therefore, from this perspective of the fair terms of social cooperation, peace can be conceived as the condition of a well-ordered, just society, which is characterized by a significant degree of the absence of violence, which, as we'll see, has to do with avoidable harm. And in a positive sense, peace is the presence of justice, defined as the common affirmation of the fair terms of social cooperation, and the establishment and functioning of institutions consistent with those terms. From this perspective, we have a justified moral claim, we could say a human right to peace, establishing and sustaining peace for all people is a basic, urgent, moral imperative. So, having defined peace as the condition of a well-ordered, just society, a society that's governed by an accepted and mutually beneficial conception of justice, we turn to the idea of peace spheres, which refers to the space within which peace occurs, the space of peace. And peace spheres are multi-dimensional. They can be inward, they can be within a group and between groups, and universal. That is, the peace sphere can be global. So the peace spheres, we could think of them in terms of the levels of society that require peace and justice, from the local to the national to the international to the global level. These spheres are dynamic and relational. They occur within multiple levels of human interaction within societies. At the local and national levels, peace and justice pertain to the basic institutional structure of the domestic society, and thus the relationship between citizens. At the level of international society, peace concerns the relationships between nations and their governments, that is, nation states. So peace occurs in terms of the relations between nations. And at the global level, peace involves the relationship between peoples within a transnational cosmopolitan sphere, a global sphere, characterized by the recognition of and respect for human rights. We will elaborate these in subsequent lectures. These peace spheres, these multiple peace spheres, have numerous complex and overlapping issues, which include human aggression and war, distributive, political, and environmental justice, and justifiable responses to injustice. Since peace can be conceived initially as the absence of violence, we will turn next to the exploration of the nature of violence. These multiple spheres, aggression and war, various kinds of justice, and justifiable responses to injustice, form the content of our inquiry going forward.